Thank you. 4 years ago, I stood here and said that bombing Libya would be a huge mistake. But of course, the UK Parliament and this Parliament were desperate. There was a clamour to go to war. And so now we have a failed state of Libya, which is now a conduit being used for criminal trafficking gangs trying to bring people to Europe. We are guilty for this crisis. We are directly guilty for the drownings that are going on. And we are hypocrites in this place when we talk about poverty in Africa, when we pursue a common agricultural policy that puts barriers up to them selling us their agricultural produce, where we have a fisheries policy that rapes and pillages their seas and has caused environmental destruction, and we just assuage our consciences by giving away a bit of foreign aid. I am not blind to the human suffering that we've caused in many of these countries. I would call on this Parliament, this Commission, to end the barriers to trade, to stop the fisheries policy, to ask the United Nations to get involved and to try and help. But the real question we face is, what are we to do? Are we to go down the Australian system in dealing with this crisis? And indeed, the Australian Premier, Tony Abbott, has offered us his advice and help. Australia faced this. And Australia not only have stopped the boats from coming, they've stopped people from drowning. But no, we're not interested in what the Australians have done. We have decided that we can deal with this on our own. So we've decided that people can come and that people won't be sent back. Now, I suspect that it's a shock, it will be a hell of a shock, to many European citizens, including the British, to understand that we've already agreed a common European asylum system. And what today is about, and today's resolution, is the direct implementation of it. The problem, ladies and gentlemen, is this. The definitions for who qualifies for asylum are so wide, they include not just people coming from war, not just people coming from failed states. Mr. Juncker this morning seemed to suggest that perhaps it would even include people who were fleeing poverty. I'm sorry, we simply can't accept countless millions. Already in countries like mine, 77% of the population say we cannot take immigration at current levels. But there is a real and genuine threat. When ISIS say they want to flood our continent with 500,000 Islamic extremists, they mean it. And there is nothing in this document that will stop those people from coming. Indeed, I fear we face a direct threat to our civilization if we allow large numbers of people from that war-torn region into Europe. It is ironic that 9 days before a British general election, Mr. Cameron and Mr. Miliband are not engaged in this debate, and in fact the UK can do nothing. We are impotent. We have surrendered our ability to get involved. I promise my party will stand up to this impending disaster for all concerned.
Mr. Lamberts, you wanted to ask a question.
The first time that we've had these kinds of exchanges, I'd just like to remind you that many terrorist attacks that your United Kingdom suffered from were actually acts of your nationals. Not imported terrorists, but people who were homegrown. So I'm not sure that any of your answers is an answer to that issue. Thank you.
I do accept, Mr. Lamberts, that our failed policy of state-sponsored multiculturalism has led to a fifth column inside many of our countries. However, the number of those is mercifully small compared to the number of Islamic extremists committing the most bestial acts on a daily basis right across that region. This policy has no means and no way of filtering out extremists in favour of people fleeing in genuine fear of their lives. And as such, we are making a massive mistake. Let us follow the example of Australia. Let us do everything we can to reverse the hypocrisy of groups like yours that have voted to make Africa poorer. Let us do those things. But if the message is that anybody that comes will be accepted, we are headed for disaster.
Mr. Farage has the floor.
Thank you. Nobody in their right minds would not agree that it was a sensible thing to do to get France and Germany together round the table, to break bread with each other, to have a deal with each other back in the 1950s, and to work as sovereign democratic nations together for peace. All of that was absolutely right and high-minded. Sadly, the whole thing has become corrupted. Tony Blair said, the EU today is no longer about peace, it is about power. And how right he was, and how that power has shifted. When Kohl and Mitterrand came here, representing their countries 25 years ago, it was a partnership of equals, but no longer. France is now severely diminished, trapped inside a currency, frankly, from which she can't recover. And the French voice in this relationship and in Europe is little more now, frankly, than a pipsqueak. We're living, and it's an irony, isn't it, that a project that was designed to contain German power has now given us a totally German-dominated Europe. Just look at the euro. Germany has a currency that is undervalued by 20%. A growing and massive trade surplus, and most growth in the German economy since the collapse of 2008 has indeed been in exports to other Eurozone countries, such as your very big arms sales to countries like Greece. And when we have a general election that says a country like Greece wants to change direction, well, I'm sorry, but that now must be brushed aside because the Germans don't want it. And what must count as perhaps the worst piece of public policy seen in modern Europe for half a century, when you compounded the already failing and flawed EU common asylum policy by saying to the whole world, please come to Europe. And we saw, frankly, virtually a stampede. And we learn that 80% of those that are coming are not Syrian refugees. In fact, what you've done is to open the door to young, male, economic migrants, many of whom, I have to say, behave in a rather aggressive manner, quite the opposite to what you would ever expect to see from any refugee. And yet when that failure is met by objections from countries like Hungary, their opinions are crushed. This isn't a Europe of peace, it's a Europe of division. It's a Europe of disharmony. It's a Europe that is a recipe for resentment. And yet, faced with all this failure, both of you said the same thing today. You said Europe isn't working, so we must have more Europe. More of the same failing. Well, there is, I think, a bright star on the horizon. It's called the British referendum. And given that none of you want to concede Britain the ability to take back control of our own borders, a Brexit now looks more likely than at any point in modern time. And I hope and pray that Britain voting to leave the European Union will be the beginning of the end of a project, however noble its original intentions, has gone rotten.
Ja, du setzt euch da wieder hin,
So, if he wanted to go, then he starts again.
Look, Europe's going to have to handle, but they're going to have riots in Germany. What's happening in Germany, I always thought Merkel was like this great leader. What she's done in Germany is insane. It's insane. They're having all sorts of attacks. They're having
letting in
that many people. What they should do is the countries should all get together, including the Gulf states who have nothing but money. They should all get together and they should take a big swath of land in Syria and they should do a safe zone for people so that they could have a safe where they could live. And then ultimately go back to their country, go back to where they came from.
Does the U.S. get involved in making that safe?
I would help them economically, even though we own $19 trillion. What I won't do is take in 200,000 Syrians who could be ISIS. John, I've been watching this migration, and I see the people. I mean, they're men. They're mostly men, and they're strong men. These are physically young, strong men. They look like prime-time soldiers. Now, it's probably not true, but where are the women? You see some women, you see some children, but for the most part, I'm looking at these strong men. So you ask two things. Number one, why aren't they fighting for their country? And number two, I don't want these people coming over here. And even on a humanitarian, you know, when I was first asked this question, you asked it to me a long time ago, When they were talking about 3,000 people, I begrudgingly would say, oh, maybe, I don't know, maybe.
Letting them into the United
States. A little bit. Then they said 10,000. I'm not thrilled, but maybe 200,000 people. This could be the greatest Trojan horse. This could make the Trojan horse look like peanuts if these people turned out to be a lot of ISIS.
Yesterday, William Hague said that voters should not make their decision in the referendum on the basis of controlling immigration. Do you agree?
William Hague made this statement yesterday. Nigel Farage, was he right?
Extraordinary, isn't it? This was the Hague who, of course, was the great Eurosceptic leader of the Conservative Party, who fought against the euro, who railed against European integration and appears to have really rather sold out. Look, whichever way you cut this, immigration is the number one issue in British politics. It has been for some years. The opinion polls are astonishing. 77% of the British public want cuts to the numbers coming into Britain, and over half the voters want a reduction to near zero. So people are very upset, they're very unhappy, they're seeing the impact on local schools, they're seeing the impact on GP services, they're seeing the impact on housing or the inability of young people to get on the housing ladder. So that's why it's the number one issue. And I think that the reason in this referendum why we have to talk about this is all the while, that, which is a British passport, or should be, but the first two words on it are European Union, that is available to 508 million people. And any of those people, if they wish, can come to this country. We have no control. The only way we get control is to vote to leave the European Union. And I think William Hague shows he's just completely lost touch with where the British public are on this issue.
Okay.
In my mind, this is the issue that will decide the referendum.
And that's why you said it didn't matter if we weren't slightly richer by leaving, as long as we cut immigration.
What I said was this. There are reports that say that we're better off with mass immigration. There are some reports that say we're slightly worse off economically with mass immigration. But to me, there's an issue called the quality of life. And I think that matters more than money. It's about thinking our kids and grandkids can have what we've had in terms of access to local healthcare, in terms of our kids getting into local primary schools, in terms of our overall quality of life. And that, David, I think, matters more than GDP rising by 1% per annum.
No doubt we'll do this. Eddie Izzard.
Well, between 2001 and 2011, EU migrants put in 20 billion into the EU economy. They put more in than they take out. I know people are concerned about immigration, but we've got to look at the facts. These facts are in front of us. I mean, Sarah Wollaston, she exited the Brexit campaign today because she said that the figures that are coming out from the Brexit side are coming out false. And she said, and she's GP, she said, like the NHS, a lot of information was stoked up about the NHS, and she said it's not true, it isn't true. So she's actually left the campaign and she's joined the Remain side. There are skeptics, Eurosceptics, that are joining the Remain side, even though they're still skeptical, because they see the economic problems of pulling out. We pull out, we are going to go into recession. Brexit is almost an anagram of recession. If you put two S's into the word Brexit, it's Brexession. They almost designed it that way.
What's that got to do with immigration, Eddie? Wasn't that the question?
Well, no, the point is immigration. If we pull out, then we become Norway. Norway still has to have the free movement of people in. So we become Norway, or are we going to become Albania? If we become Albania, the Prime Minister of Albania wants to join the EU, or we become Canada. The point is, you are from an immigrant family, and you're married to an immigrant. Why are you so against immigration when it worked?
Because we have to control it. We have to control it. Hang on.
You grew up. You're French Protestant from one side, you're German from the other side. Yeah. You should be the champion.
Well, I am.
The champion of people who are immigrants coming in. Look what they did. They got it to your situation.
Why do you want to stop people from the Commonwealth coming in? Because we have an open door to Southern.
Why do you want to stop people coming in from countries?
Because I want to have an Australian-style point system where we get the right people coming to Britain in the right numbers.
Nigel, you told your followers to bully people to vote for you. This is not the right attitude for you to have.
If we go on with current levels of immigration,
you've got to answer your own situation here.
Our population will be 80 million by 2040.
All right.
How are we going to cope? If you have a country in which the population goes up as a direct result of immigration, what you find is not a shortage of green fields, if that's where you wanted to build houses. You find a shortage of primary school places. You find a shortage of GP surgeries. You know, we have fewer GPs per head than any other country in Europe today. You find congestion, whether it's on the roads or the London Underground or wherever you go. And what you find is that actually you're constantly playing catch up, and really the general quality of life for the massive population has gone down. So I think those comments today were wholly irresponsible. And what we've seen, I mean, it's quite interesting to think that, you know, in 1990, the population of this country was 55 million. It is now between 62 and 63 million. That is a massive, massive increase. And I think ordinary folk going about their lives are feeling it. And I think, having a proper immigration policy, controlling the numbers, doing what nearly 200 countries in the world do, namely controlling the numbers that come and the type of people that come, is the answer.
Right. Russell Brand.
I sometimes feel worried about you, Nigel Farage. But the reason I feel worried is because I know a lot of people are frightened in our country. I know a lot of people are feeling afraid and frustrated. And there is a sense that there is a corrupt group in our country using our resources, taking away our jobs, taking away our housing, not paying taxes, exploiting us. And there is an economic elite that this man's party is funded by, that this man comes from background working in the city. Let me tell you something. There was an economic crash and a lot of money was lost. His mates in the city farted. Nigel Farage is pointing at immigrants and the disabled and holding his nose. Immigrants are not causing the economic problems and suffering we experience. As much as any of us, I enjoy seeing Nigel Farage in a boozer with a pint and a fag, laughing off his latest scandals about breastfeeding or whatever. I enjoy it. But this man is not a cartoon character. He ain't Del Boy. He ain't Arthur Daly. He is a pound shop Enoch Powell, and we got to watch him.
Russell, that's all well and good, and you've got your point of view. The question was, is Britain overcrowded? And do you think I'm wrong? Do you not think?
Nigel, can I not be more clear, mate? I think you're wrong. I come from the kind of community.
This is called Question Time, this programme, right?
Well, tonight you could have an hour.
And what happens is, members of the audience ask questions, and we're expected to answer them. You haven't answered this lady's question. Do you think Britain's overcrowded and there is a strain on public resources and people's quality of life?
We need more money for public resources.
Well, where's it going to come from?
It's not overcrowded. It's going to come... I'm so glad you asked, mate. Since the financial crash, banker bonuses have exceeded £80 billion. George Osborne, your Chancellor, campaigned to stop caps being placed on banker bonuses. At the same time, there were austerity cuts against the poorest among us, the disabled, people that we need to be looking after. We need to close tax loopholes which are exploited by big corporations. There's money. I've got money now. I've seen rich people. There's plenty of money out there. It's just not being distributed.
Yes. And I don't like people preaching that I am any part responsible for anything. I've never heard him criticise the disabled.
I never have.
Okay? Never. Okay? And you are a campaigner. Yeah? I'm going to go back to the last question. Please let me finish.
Mate.
Stand. Stand for Parliament. If you're going to campaign, then stand. Okay? Okay, you have the media profile for it. Do it.
My problem would be, mate, I'd stand for Parliament, but I'd be scared that I'd become one of them. I know what side of the...
No, I'm sorry. You've full addiction and you've beaten it, okay? You can't preach that. That is rubbish.
Mate,
you cannot preach that.
I'm not preaching.
Well, you are. You've attacked him, okay?
Yeah.
Okay? And you've attacked him, and you've attacked everybody that stands for his party.
I do.
They.
We're trying.
I'm sorry.
I'm not attacking people
they are
that...
people on the street.
And racist.
Are they? Rubbish. I'm sorry, but at the end of the day, it's the general public that are standing for him.
Trying to blame immigrants for the cutbacks because of his rich.
Russell, you've got some voters here, mate. You ought to stand. I mean, these are your voters. They're lovely people, aren't they?
I'm coming for you, Farage.
They're lovely people.
Just here for a break stop here. You saw on the gangway.
Behave yourself over
Yeah.
there. The point I want to make to Russell is that you say you claim to sort of stand up for the working classes, but you've got to understand that it's the working classes that have been hit the hardest by immigration, mass immigration. You know, wage compression, the change in communities over a short period of time has led to, tension within communities. So you've got to appreciate that actually, it's all right to say, criticising UKIP and Nigel Farage, but actually it's the people at the bottom of society that have been hit the hardest by immigration.
I'm telling you, mate, honestly, I come from the same community as you come from. I've been very lucky and I've had a few breaks and I've got a few quid now. And I'm telling you that immigration has always been happening. What happened in 2008 was very unique. If I thought...
It's a scale.
My friend, I swear to you, if I thought, listen, try this, for 2 years, turn your focus to corruption in the city, turn your focus to apathetic politicians, turn yourself to the corruptions going on there, and if in 2 years' time your life ain't got better, campaigning against the people that have wealth and power, not those that have very little, if it's still the same, I'll come with you and campaign. But I'm telling you, I know where the power is, I know where the money is, I know what we've got to do.
Take back control of our borders and put in place a positive immigration policy, one that the people of Britain would overwhelmingly support, and by that I mean we want an Australian-style point system to decide who comes to live, work and settle in this country. We're asking to do what normal countries all over the world do. We've gone from about 30,000 people a year net to the figures that we saw last week of 300,000. And there are very good reasons why the people of this country are now deeply unhappy with that situation. The impact on schools, the current accident and emergency crisis that we've seen this winter in our hospitals, the changes that have happened within our communities. And also just think on this. In what is already the most crowded country in Europe, the fact that we have to build one new dwelling every 7 minutes just to cope with current rates of immigration. And above all, I think what's been felt by millions of ordinary, decent working families is wage compression, an unlimited supply of unskilled labour that has made for many people the minimum wage, in effect, the maximum wage. Now, I know that there have been beneficiaries of open-door immigration, and many big businesses have increased their profits by keeping wages artificially low. And I know that it's been a boon for the rich, because if you're very wealthy, open-door immigration means cheaper nannies, cheaper chauffeurs, and cheaper gardeners. But the vast majority of British people want change. They want us to control not just the quantity, but also, crucially, the quality of who comes into this country. We want to do as the Australians do. We want sensible, controlled numbers of people to come to this country, but people that have got skills and trades that will benefit this nation. People who have not got a criminal record. People who have not got a life-threatening illness. And people who, when they come, bring with them medical insurance and do not qualify for state benefits until they've been in the country for 5 years and contributed to the system. In fact, I would call this a common-sense immigration policy that would greatly benefit the people of this nation, and that is what we're going to campaign on. We don't want mass immigration to continue on its current rate, and we certainly don't need vast amounts of unskilled labour coming into this country. We need better controls over our borders. The border agency itself needs beefing up, and our immigration spokesman, Stephen Wolfe, this morning will lay out more of those plans. And we'd like to establish a migration control commission, given a remit to make sure that lower numbers happen in all areas of people coming in net to this country. We are the only party in British politics that is going to talk and address honestly an issue that is, for most people, their number one concern in British politics. And perhaps it's no wonder that a recent opinion poll showed that we are now the most trusted party in British politics to deal with this issue.
People entitled to think that as a party, and you as the leader, are happier with some migrants than other migrants, based on ethnic or national background, and nothing to do with the skills or the languages that they bring.
Well, do you think it would be a good idea if you had if you were running your own immigration policy, which of course Britain doesn't, because we're EU members, do you think it'd be a good idea to get a lot of people to come who didn't speak English? Do you think that would aid and abet integration in society? Well, the answer, of course, to that clearly is no. Do I think...
Do you favour some immigrants? Let's suppose one from Mogadishu, with the same skills, the same ability to speak English, but not as a first language, from one from Melbourne. Do you have a preference? Do you have a preference?
I have to confess, I do have a slight preference. I do think, naturally, that people from India and Australia are in some ways more likely to speak English, understand common law, and have a connection with this country than some people that come perhaps from countries that haven't fully recovered from being behind the Iron Curtain. But that's irrelevant. When you have an Australian-style point system, what you do is you take out of that all subjectivity, and you look at things on a purely objective basis.
So you don't give points for being Australian or points for being Judeo-Christian?
No, you get points because you've got languages and skills.
But why wouldn't you? Because you just said you'd prefer the Judeo-Christian or the Commonwealth immigrants.
Look, this country has long associations and links with Australia, with India, with countries like that, all right? And we have been friends together in crisis many, many times. And what we've done is we've turned our backs on them. We've turned our backs on them in terms of trade, by making life very difficult for them. And we've really become a country whose political elite and much of whose media elite are totally incapable of thinking about the world outside the European club.
You say that. In fact, your manifesto says the liberal metropolitan elite often tells us patriotism is wrong. Who is this liberal metropolitan elite who says patriotism is wrong?
Well, I think you only have to look at the tweet and I won't name her because that would be really quite nasty, but a certain Labour MP, put out a tweet of a chap with a white van and with a cross of St George outside his house, as if to say, look at these ghastly people. And there is too much of that. There is too much snobbery. And actually, that's what it's about. It is London-based snobbery about the way ordinary folk feel. And out there in the country, a lot of people are unashamedly patriotic, and that's considered to be awful in London.
I don't know. I just wonder whether there are different patriotic visions, and there are certain people who you would call liberal metropolitan elite who have a different vision of Britain. Did you see the Paddington Bear movie last year?
No.
Terrific movie with a rather sort of moving, in a sense, proclamation of the virtues of multiculturalism, which I know you hate because he's a bear and he's different and he feels very at home and is made to feel welcome here.
I think using the word...
Would that be a sort of metropolitan elite movie that is kind of a travesty of British patriotism and British values?
The fact that you throw the word in hate like that as a sort of off-the-cuff comment...
But you have lots of insults
As if, of course, Mr Farage hates things... What's your evidence for that?
Well, you said in your manifesto, you say multiculturalism is divisive.
What is your evidence that I hate it?
But you say it's divisive. You say it's a politically correct experiment. A political correction experiment, you've called it.
You've just used a very strong word, and I'm picking up on it. I don't hate anything.
You don't hate multiculturalism?
I don't hate multiculturalism.
But you don't like it. Can we go that far?
We have made some real mistakes with state-sponsored multiculturalism and division within society, and that's something That's something which, when I was saying it a few years ago, was considered to be dreadful. Now people like Trevor Phillips say it.
Nigel Farage, very good morning to you. It became a bit of a mantra, didn't it, in the Brexit campaign? There will be a points-based system, Aussie style. Well, it's not for Theresa May.
No, I mean, I've been saying it for 10 years, and indeed, it was one of the reasons that UKIP went from being a small party to being a big party, as people want to have controls, not just on the numbers of people that come, but on the type of people that come, to know that those that come to work bring their own health insurance, haven't got criminal records, and that's why it caught the public's imagination. And I guess the concern is this, that for 6 years, Theresa May was the Home Secretary. She presided over record levels of net migration into this country. And now to say we're not going to have a points-based system looks like backsliding. And I think there'll be a lot of people today who voted for Brexit, who were happy when the Prime Minister said Brexit means Brexit, but are now just a little bit worried.
She might just think it's a lousy idea. I mean, she has said, or people have said, that when you look at the Australian-style points-based system, you look at a country where immigration actually, for all its purported merits, immigration has risen sharply.
Well, with a points-based system, you can use it to increase immigration or you can use it to decrease immigration. The point is you have a set of criteria that unless people pass, they simply won't be allowed in. I accept there are other ways of doing it. You know, a proper strict work permit scheme could well be one way of doing it. The worry is, though, we've not been given a date for Article 50 to be declared. We go on paying £34 million a day net into the European Union's coffers, and now we're told not just that she's dropping the points-based system, but number 10 this morning would not rule out EU citizens having preferential access to this country. And believe me, those people, those 17.4 million people who voted for Brexit, they want delivery.
Yeah, I mean, the trade-off could be there could be some sort of system that would preserve the single market. And you can understand why there are those, perhaps within the government and without the government too, who feel it's a very good idea. When they listen to the warnings, we were interviewing the Japanese ambassador to London just an hour ago, who, in fairly coded, nuanced ways, repeated what we've heard over the weekend, which is that some of those big Japanese investors, the big car makers, might look again at their investments in the UK if we weren't part of the European single market.
The Japanese told us if we didn't join the euro 16 years ago, they might leave the UK. The Japanese told us if we voted for Brexit, they might leave the UK. And now they're saying if we don't stay part of the single market, they might leave the UK. They're here because they have a good, skilled workforce doing a great job for them. And of course, we're going to have a sensible deal with the European Union. Goodness me, the number of BMWs and Audi and Mercedes I've seen on London's roads this morning confirms to me that they sell us more than we sell them. Look, whatever arguments there may be in the Cabinet or in Parliament about the single market, bear in mind our political class support the EU single market. Our citizens, in a free and fair referendum, voted against the single market. We voted to be a self-governing democratic nation that trades with our neighbours but opens ourselves up to the world.
Not far from where you sit, Mr. Farage, at Westminster Hall in the Palace of Westminster, the debate going on today about the whole question, in the minds of some people, 4 million people who signed an online petition, of whether what's needed for the specifics of Brexit is a second referendum. What's your message to those people?
Well, it's a fine EU tradition. You know, we've seen it in Ireland and we've seen it in Denmark. If people vote and get the wrong result, they're asked to vote again. My answer to all these people is this wasn't the best of three. This was the real thing. You may not like it, but the Brexit side won. Please get over it and accept the fact we're living in a democracy.
I want to bring Nigel Farage in, that's a Brexit leader, who, by the way, is on the short list for Time Magazine's Person of the Year. Only about a dozen people on that list. But Nigel, always good to have you. I wanted to get your take on that comment about refugees. We have to help refugees who've escaped the horrors of war. What did you think of that?
Well, it's funny, isn't it? The one thing we didn't get from Obama was any contrition, any apology, any acknowledgement of the fact that actually the unnecessary interference in places like Libya is directly what has led to the growth of ISIS and has led to this flood of displaced people or refugees. I think we need to go back to the 1951 Geneva Convention definition of what a refugee is. A refugee is a man or a woman who is in direct threat of their freedom or their life as a result of their race, their religion, or their beliefs. Now, that's fine. And I think we can, provided we have secure borders, which of course at the moment we don't, provided we have secure borders, we can find room in our hearts for genuine refugees. And I'm thinking particularly of Christians living in Syria, living in Iraq, being murdered, being persecuted, as one very good, clear example. What we cannot do, I'm afraid, and if only we could as human beings, but there are 59 million people currently displaced by war, according to the United Nations. And if Obama is suggesting that we in the West can find room for all of these people, particularly given the fact that we have no means to vet whether these people have terrorist links, then there's a problem. And one quick thing, Neil. A year ago, we saw those appalling massacres taking place in restaurants and that theatre in France. Of the 8 men that committed those atrocities, 5 of them had got into Europe, crossing the Mediterranean, posing as refugees. So I'm sorry, Obama, we need to be more careful than that.
Now, one of the things he talked about is that we as a civil society have to look after our weakest members and displaced members, obviously referring to the refugees, and that there's a vetting process. I'm paraphrasing here, but he's always said that in this country, in America, we have a vetting process. We go through this closely, but we've proven that that vetting process oftentimes can fall through the cracks. So what does a President Trump do?
Well, look, I repeat the point. Most of these people, suffering though they are, but most of them would not qualify as refugees. And you know, when David Cameron visited one of the camps, and he was shown around by a Jordanian minister who said, even though this camp has women and children in it, and not just young males, even here, you must accept, Mr. Cameron, that 2% of these people will be people of terrorist-leaning sympathies. And I think what Trump has said very clearly in the campaign, and my goodness me, it's resonated, is that for America to be safe, you have to be absolutely sure that anyone coming to you is a genuine refugee and has no links with terrorism. And if you couple that with stopping open borders, you will make your country safer. And I'm speaking to you here from Brussels, where there are whole districts that effectively have become no-go zones. So the message is, Trump, don't let America become like Brussels. And you know what? I'm sure that he won't.
Let me ask you finally, in this short list of Time Magazine's Person of the Year, inciting you and choosing you as head of the UK Independence Party, and I'm quoting here, Farage was the face of the successful campaign for Britain to leave the European Union, positioning the referendum as the start of a global populist wave against the political establishment. I'm going on to say one that would later include Donald Trump. What do you make of that? Well, I would like to think it's true in some ways. I mean, I battled for nearly a quarter of a century. I was laughed at, mocked and derided because I believed in nation-state democracy. I believed in normality. I believed in the things that my grandparents went to war to fight and defend for. You know, democracy in the nation-state. Took me a long time, but we won. Did it help Donald Trump and the Republicans? I would like to think that it did. And of course, just 48 hours ago, we saw in Italy the third big revolution of this year. So whether I win or not, I've no idea. I mean, personally, I might vote for Beyonce. I'm not sure. But let's see what happens. All right, you're on there with Donald Trump, but I think your stiffest competition could be Beyonce Knowles. I just want to break it to you. But Nigel Farage, thank you very, very much. Very, very good.